What's going on, everyone? It's Bales, and welcome back to another episode of AFL Fantasy Head2Head, where we put two players up against one another to see who will be picking between the two. This is episode number 24 of the series. Only one more episode to go after this tomorrow. If you haven't checked out the other 23 episodes of the series, make sure that you do that. As always, if you are enjoying the content around here, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel as we make our way to 2,000 subscribers. We're near 1,500. We're closing in. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you get involved and on the podcast, 5-star ratings and reviews and all that good stuff. But joining me is the final member of the coaches panel. So we're going to complete the set today, which is fantastic. Talking about a couple of forwards that are quite relevant this year, a couple of cheaper ones. It is Kane from the coaches panel. Mate, how are you?
Great, Bales. Thanks for having me on. Yes, MJ said you have to do it. Bales is nearing the 50 most relevant. He's up to 25 episodes this year. He's coming for us. Just go in there, suss out what he's doing, anything you can steal. But no, mate, absolutely pumped. And now you've picked two really, really fascinating forwards. And I know you've given me demon ties as well. So I'm happy there and feel like I'm a little bit more prepared than maybe other teams.
Yeah. Exactly right. And I thought that was why this is a good episode to get you on as well, because we are talking about a former demon former demon James Jordon and a current demon who moved there in Jack Billings. So I'll be taking Jack Billings today. You'll be taking James Jordon, but you'll be able to give us very good insights, I think, for both players. So it'll be very, very good to see what you think of the two and then who we pick at the end of the episode. So we'll get started with the prices and everything like that first. So we've got Jack Billings, who is currently $538K with an ownership of, as the thing loads for me, 2.32%. So quite unique. I actually thought it'd be a little bit higher than that. So quite a unique pick. But again, plays opening round, we get a bit more of a look, and that could increase depending on how he goes in the last practice game, and then also in opening round. James Jordon, 18.01%. It's a bit higher owned there, 454K. So cheaper and more higher owned. So that'll be something that we'll probably chat about as well. So we'll start off with Jack Billings. So Jack Billings moved from St Kilda to Melbourne for a little bit more opportunity, but he was sort of picked. So it wasn't sort of like Melbourne went out and said, we want Jack Billings. It was sort of, it was there. Melbourne were like, yeah, we'll take you on. Billings wanted a bit more opportunity. So we'll see how he goes. But obviously we know the whole story about him being picked out high in the draft, but a whole heap of superstars and being picked there. But career high average of 94.6. That came in 2017. So it's been a fair while since he's gone over 90. That was his only year over 86, actually, in fact. But he's had some good seasons. 84.1 in 2015, 85.2 in 2018, 83.4 in 2021. He even had a 74.6 in 2020. So just that's probably closer to over 90, quite nearing 100. So that could have even been his other average over 90 there. So actually, and I got that wrong. His career high average was 98.5, in 2019. So apologies, that missed that one there. So 2 seasons over 90 there. It's going to be just very interesting to see how he fits. So obviously with Melbourne, with a few outs, obviously we've seen the retirement of obviously your Brayshaw. We've seen obviously off-field dramas with a few of the players there as well. We don't know what's going to happen, like if Oliver's going to start the season. So there's a bit of opportunity for Jack Billings to play as a half forward. Lockie Hunter as well is injured as well. We don't know when he'll be back, but it's Kane. This is where I'll bring you into this, because being the Melbourne man yourself, how do you see Jack Billings fitting into this Melbourne side? Because there's opportunity there, there's potential avenues for scoring, and we talked about off camera with this early buy. He's could be a good avenue to sort of start with him and get him a bit of cash. So, what are your thoughts of Jack Billings as a first season as a demon?
Well, Bales, off the top, you couldn't have picked your timing any better for these two, could you, in terms of having the most up-to-date news? Because in the past week, there's been a lot. We'll get into the Jordon stuff with Luke Parker breaking his arm, but as you flagged, and I think it's worth just rehashing a little bit. So we've lost Angus Brayshaw to the D's due to retirement. That's super sad, but that's a best 22 player that's out. So automatically Billings has jumped up a rung. You flagged Oliver. We just don't know where he's at. Great to see him play in the VFL practice match. Also got to have a run against the Tigers, playing, again, with the seconds, but just having him out there, the guy's an absolute superstar. It's just minutes. It's just training. Shane McAdam was the other one that came across to Melbourne. Haven't seen him in action as he comes back from injury, but he's another forward. So without doing a whole lot, Billings is starting to climb those rungs. And I think that's the thing that's really fascinating about him is he's been restricted to just 11 games, Bales, across the last 2 years. And when you look at those averages, it's probably no surprise that those are, his lowest averages for basically all the way since his first season. And when you don't have the continuity, if you're getting 11 games in, there's been broken legs, there's been soft tissue injuries. He's just had a really rough time. So I think it worked out really well for both parties. St Kilda letting him go, going in a different direction under Ross, looking for young players like Darcy Wilson to come in the draft. They identified Liam Henry. It was just time to move Billings on. And I think Melbourne identified that when this guy's fit, he can be a forward. He's a handy mark. He's a good set shot of goal. But I think the thing that probably appealed most is with ball in hand, he can be a really effective kick inside 50. And that was probably the thing that Melbourne were most getting criticised for, was that ability to find a target inside 50 and then convert. There was a lot of games where you could argue they could have won if they just kicked straight. They didn't. Yeah. And you look at who they've brought in, McAdam and Billings predominantly, looks like they're trying to rectify that. So just having him in the squad is super important. With those outs, he's now in a fight, isn't he? There's a lot of guys that Melbourne's got, some established like a Neil Bullen that's, a best 22 player that's probably not fantasy relevant and doesn't get those plaudits. But if you look at the Melbourne best and fairest, he's always up there and he's always in there. So he's really fighting for me, Bales, with your Kate Chandlers. We loved him as a rookie last year. He came out of the gates and he was everywhere. Then you get these Bailey Lorries. So a pick that was pretty high for the Ds that hasn't really established himself. He's also been a sub candidate. So I'm super curious how they structure up and where they see Jack Billings. If he's in that high half forward role, it can be tricky for points, but also with a round 6 bye, and you're only needing 6 games to probably do his job. I can see him having one good score and averaging 80 across those first 6 weeks and probably doing all that he needs to do for our sides.
Yeah, exactly. And playing it from difference between Marvel and MCG as well, for a player that can maybe get into some open space and get those marks. Jack Billings could be that sort of player in the MCG. I think it's going to sort of fit with him. And that's where the opening round, we've talked about it so much this pre-season. This is where that comes in, because if he pops off for 100 or a big, even an 85 plus, his ownership's going to go high because he's going to get that double price rise. If he has another good score against the Dogs, who we know can get up points, especially to the half backs, and they sometimes can get up points to wingmen or half forwards that also push up and can get those +6s as well. So if he can start for 2 good games, then there's your cash gen. So that's what's going to make him so interesting as a pick. Like, in terms of Billings, do you see him being a guy that can go at a 80, 85 for the first 6 weeks? Do you see him a bit lower? Do you think could be very up and down? What do you think with Billings?
I think that's your hope, Bales, if you pick him. I think that's your hope, that I need 6 weeks and I need, 80 plus. I think if you start going beyond that, just the variance of the role, he's going to have some quiet weeks. And that's probably the thing that does scare you. Now, if you're picking him, I think he's at least probably scored 70, 75 plus in that opening round, just to get your interest and pick him in the squad. But there's always that risk with these guys, is it's just really hard. And you look at Neil Bullen, he's had stretches where he's been 80 plus for a month, even 90 plus for a month. But then the corresponding month, he might be in the 45s, in the 50s. And he's just playing the same role. It's just one of those ones where there's heaps of variance. It's really, really tricky. Now, I think where it might get interesting for people is if Billings had a wing role or a centre bounce role. I don't see that personally. We've seen Ed Langdon be a stalwart on the wing, and now Caleb Windsor, who I've got massive raps for, and I think just fits the bill perfectly with his leg speed and his size. He's just a perfect complement. Lockie Hunter's out of the side. So I don't see Billings needed too much on the wing. And then the centre bounce, it looks like Rivers and Salem are going to be those guys alongside Petrarca, Viney and Tom Sparrow that soak up all the CBA. So, and you've also got Oliver, exactly, Bale. So for me, it feels like, okay, in this forward line, we know we're going to probably have Van Rooyen. We'll see how Petty can get back in time. We know Fritsch is that sort of hybrid third tall. Shaki might have to be in there just to be that ruck support for Gawn. And it's like, okay, Neil Bullen's does his job perfectly every week. Cozzy Pickett's suspended opening round, but comes back round 1. So that's another little flag on Billings, which we won't have a line of sight on. And then, as I said, you get into these Chandlers, these Bailey Lorries, these type of guys where you go, okay, is Jack Billings ahead of them? Is he fighting with them? How much can someone score in that role? As I said, Chandler was great. turned up in the first game, 360s after that. But then he had a stretch where it's 37, 41, 38, and across the season, his average was 57.
Just such an inconsistent role.
It's just really tough. And that's the thing I think in fantasy that can be hard, Bales, is they might be doing exactly what the team and what the coach wants of them. Unfortunately for us, though, it might not translate to fantasy points. And that's probably just my one concern with Billings. And that's where I say, if you're projecting this pick to work, it's Jack Billings is making it to his bye. I'm hoping there's a good score in there. Again, we've got the advantage of opening round that will set the table for that. Get that cash flow hopefully working in the right direction. Again, if it's not, you're just not going to pick him. So I think that's your hope is I'm jumping off at round 6, if not earlier. Again, if he makes that quick cash and it aligns to jump off, especially if it's someone that has appeared off their bye or someone else you just want to target, I think that's the big edge, is that Melbourne, along with Richmond, are in that final bye of the teams that play opening round. And I think that's a massive advantage when you're talking about making the cash and also timing your exit or your parachute.
Yeah, and having that player pool to choose from of who you bring in. That's a very good point you make there as well. But we will move on to the other side of the coin. Is a former Demon moving over to the Swans, James Jordon, who, as you mentioned, it's sort of perfect how this episode did align, because all of a sudden you get the news. I think we have to start off with this bit, because normally we'd start off with what he did there, Melbourne and all this, but I think we have to start off with that midfield mix, I think, with Luke Parker. So what do you think in terms of James Jordon? Why should people be selecting him in 2024?
Well, the thing, Bales, that's so fascinating about him is, and it can be a challenge for fantasy players, is he's very versatile across the midfield. So he can play centre bounce, he can play on a wing, which was his primary role at times, sort of in his best years at Melbourne. The pre-Lockie Hunter time, Jordon was often that guy. As I said, could also play half forward predominantly. So he's super versatile, but he's also one that was sort of always restricted in his time on ground. Like, he's even in those best years, he was never really given much more than high 60% time on ground, and he was often a guy that would get subbed. So I think the thing that fits with Sydney is they've got a pretty versatile midfield as well. So you think, Warner's that guy that can play midfield, can play half forward. Gordon's just a freak, isn't he? Like, he can play half forward, he can play inside, you can have him on the wing. Like, that kicking is just what sets him apart. Rowbottom's probably your constant. He's the one you want in there, tackle, defensive pressure, really supports those other mids. And then really, by that point, you've sort of got two guys in different camps. You got Taylor Adams, super experienced leader, can also play half forward. And you've got Angus Sheldrick at the other end, who's a super, super young guy. And then James Jordan's that one that's in the prime. He's 23 years old. He's been in an AFL system for 5 years. Those first 2 years he didn't play at Melbourne and was delisted, which is obviously the point about how he got to Sydney. Once he was delisted, he's a free agent for life. So he had his pick of the litter as an unrestricted free agent, and he chose the Swans, which says to me the Swans pitched him pretty hard and said, this is how we see you being used. And I think straight off the bat, it's like they could use him at the centre bounce and resting on the wing. And if that's your two combinations, I think that's really, really fruitful, because, they can roll a lot of different guys through the wing. We've seen McInerney. We've seen even, a Blakey be pushed up there just to provide some run and support. Goulden. So for me, if you've got a wing centre bounce split, especially on a smaller ground like Sydney, where it's a bit at the SCG, like it's easier to get to more contests, that's Jordon. That's Jordon. So for me, I do see the fit. And if you've got Callum Mills out of the team and Luke Parker, as I said, it almost feels like he's fourth or fifth in line at worst for centre bounces. Plus, there's a wing role.
Yeah, exactly. And he's going to get that, because even when he was at Melbourne, he was playing full games, especially his last season. If he did play a full game, he got sort of lowish game time. But we know that he's got a decent aerobic capacity. He can run and he can play that 85+% game time. Whereas I think he's going to get that opportunity at Sydney. So so I asked you with Billings. So where do you see his scoring lying from here? Because obviously I think we probably thought when Parker was there, we thought wing roll, bit of a graveyard shift for some players, especially the SCG. But now that he might have that added responsibility, getting some CBAs, it might have increased. So where do you see his sort of scoring potential going?
Well, I think what jumps out to people as well, Bales, is those first 2 years. If you take away some of those sub-affected games that he had, he's 2021, he's 73. 2022, he's 75. So I think people in their eyes are going, like, this is where we've got to be talking as a start. Because those were teams that featured Viney, Petrarca, Oliver, Ed Langdon back in 2021. He was a high-scoring winger, up into the almost pushing the 90s. So if I'm James Jordon, and again, every time he's had an opportunity at VFL level, he's shown that he's clearly a cut above that grade of football. So for me, this is a guy that I think, okay, he has a ceiling about him. Now, it's only 3 career tons, but a 124 with not really a primary role, that jumps out as a career high score for me. So I think Bales people are thinking it's 75 to 80 at a minimum. And if I get this right and there is a big score, if there's a ton in there in that first 5 games, 6 games, like you're going to be off to the races. And especially if Parker's out of the side for those early games, like it just looks like everything's set up. And I think the reason these 2 guys are so appealing is history showed us that when these guys join a new club for opportunity, especially when they've got forward status, they've been some of the best picks in fantasy. Will Brodie jumps out straight away. It's like there's nothing really there except, some high points per minute, some VFL form. But when you've given that fresh chance, took it. Hugh Greenwood, Adelaide to the Suns. It was like, wow, this guy's a genuine premium forward for us. So it has been a happy hunting ground when we've had these guys that have moved for opportunity, especially in the Jordon age bracket where they're still young. Like this is a 23-year-old. And that's probably the slight knock that you explained with Billings is Billings was more of a, hey, this fits for us at the end of the trade period if you're Melbourne, as opposed to let's go get this guy because we see a role for him. And it just looks like the stars are aligning for Jordan Bales to come out of the gates. Again, opening round, while it doesn't count for us in terms of we haven't picked him in our sides yet, to play your old team and to get that cash gen moving in the right direction. Not that you need any more motivation, but if you're going to want to play well, and Sydney's going to want Jordan to play well to sort of prove that point even further, he just feels like the one to me that if we said after 6 weeks he's averaging 90, I don't think anyone's going, you're crazy, because it's probably just off the back of a really good score, 110, 115 plus, and then just knocking a lot of 80s and 75s around the rest of the way. And then, as you flagged, you got choices then, don't you? All those buy players are basically free by then. Do you want to hold Jordan? Do you want to keep riding it? How are you placed with your rookies and your cover? So he seems like the one to me that if we're going to fly out of the gates, the opportunity looks like it's there, especially with Parker Bales. The number one CBA guy, like heart and soul, superstar, consistent. Someone's going to have to step into that. And by all accounts, unlike Billings, who missed some time early in the preseason, Jordon hasn't missed a beat. Has not missed a beat at all.
Looking very good. And we all sort of took a lot more notice, especially when we saw, I remember there was that video of him doing the center clearance, hitting the target in the forward 50. They were just like a training drill. And people like, but I've got Jordan's numbers here from his VFL game. So he's played 6 games in the VFL in the past 2 seasons. So he played 1 in 2022 and then he played the 5 last year. So just listen to some of these scores. 123, 122, 96, 105, 158 and 149. They were his final 2 scores. And in those 2 big ones where he had like massive ones, so 158, he had 41 disposals, and the one where he scored 149, he had 36 disposals. So, and we've seen not only players that have gone from another opportunity to a club, going to another club and sort of like flourishing. We've also seen players that have not got the opportunity, but in the 2s have been dominating. So you think your Tom Mitchell's back at Sydney, wasn't playing a lot of games for them.
Flanders, goes to Hawthorn. That was him, wasn't it, last year?
He was going to be my exact next one. Flanders last year was tearing up the VFL, comes in, look what he does. And we could go, again, there's a whole list of players. So it's not only that players moving clubs to get more opportunity, but it's also players tearing up the VFL or the NEFL for Tom Mitchell and guys like that. And then they've gone on. So that's what puts Jordon in a good spot. But that'll sort of lead us into who we're picking out of the 2 players between Billings and Jordan. And I think sort of how we've talked about Jordan.
It's pretty clear cut, isn't it, Bales?
I think pretty cut. So, so Kane, you're picking Jordan over Billings?
I am. But again, Bales, I think we have to maybe give a bit more respect to Billings than I maybe thought at the start of the preseason, just because of the way things are falling. Again, a best 22 player like Brayshaw, gone. Petrarca, it sort of feels like, Oliver, it's like they just want to make sure, but by the time they bring him back, it's permanent. It's not, let's not rush him back. Again, from opening round to the grand final, it's a 30-week season. It's never been longer. So it
You don't
just
want to
feels
bring him
like to
back
me,
and get injured.
no,
Yeah,
you want to bring him back and him to be Clayton Oliver. You don't want to bring him back, and especially early in the season when you've hopefully got a full complement of players to choose from. That's when it suits. And often the thing that jumps out to me early days, Bales, is it is those more outside guys that tend to do better early in the season. And that's Jordon can do that, but he does have more of an inside game. But that's where you maybe give Billings a bit more love if, if the weather's kind and there's a few sunny games in good weather, especially at the G as opposed to the SCG, that ceiling could be there, which might be all you need. So, as we get to the season and there's some attrition, and especially a guy like Billings that has unfortunately missed so much footy, he's never going to be better poised to come out of the gates and play his best footy, probably than those first few weeks.
Yeah. He wants to make an impact straight away in new club. And then same with Jordon as well, playing against his former side in opening round. He wants to get off to a good start. So, and especially revenge game. And it might come down to, like, if people are picking one of the two, it might become, if Billings gets 100, Jordon gets an 85, people might go Billings over Jordon to get that extra, like, sort of the lower break even. But so have you got either in your side at the moment? Are you considering both in your side? Where are you sitting?
I think you have to consider both, Bales, just because we're still in that stage of the preseason where we're not quite clear on rookies. And we know that once the rookies fall into place, we can sort of start picking and choosing, those final 12 to 16 sort of positions that spin off the back of that. So I think got to heavily consider both. Jordon for mine would be the one that is ahead of Billings if I'm ranking them like that. And I just do feel like sometimes you can just sense it and go, oh, that's fallen in his lap. There's no Mills. That's fallen in his lap. There's no Parker. There's these roles opening up where it suits exactly his skill set. And again,
stars are aligning pretty much.
Yeah, the stars are aligning. And I just think 23-year-old that has just been denied opportunity by a really strong side compared to the guy that unfortunately is, nearing his late 20s, has battled injuries.
Hasn't got a fair crack at it,
and just hasn't had a fair crack. So I just feel like that's just Billings' lot that he's got to deal with. Whereas Jordon, again, give me that younger guy that's hungry, that's been in the system 5 years, demolished the seconds for multiple years, like you outlined with those monster numbers, and also just suits that team and that ground. And he got to pick that team and that ground, as opposed to a guy that maybe didn't have, the options that a Jordon did. So I think you've got to consider both, but Jordon really feels like that one that could be get you off to a hot start and play his role perfectly.
Yeah, exactly right. And I would pick Jordon as well out of the two. I probably didn't actually say exactly who I'd be picking, but I would be picking Jordon out of the two. And I'm actually just adding up the numbers here for Jordon. So in the 6 games he's played in the VFL over the past 2 seasons, average of 125.5. So not too bad when you're looking at that. I currently don't have either in my side, but that's not out of me not wanting to pick him. That's just the way that the chips have fallen right now at the team. Get to watch the Melbourne game and get to watch the Sydney game this weekend, and we get to sort of really get a look at it. And then we also get the bonus of both have got that opening round. So we get to also see both. So it'll be very interesting. This could change so much more in the next week, which is what makes this episode so much more sort of different and good about compared to the other ones, because this one is very much going to be depend on what happens over the next fortnight. But Kane, mate, it's been a pleasure having you on, and it's been a pleasure doing another episode of the Fantasy Head2Head. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you do leave a like and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as we reach, we'll close in on 2,000 subscribers. So if you help me reach that goal, we very much appreciate it. And if you're listening to the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and review at AFL Fantasy Fanatics. It would be very much appreciated. But Kane, mate, thank you very much for jumping on. As I said, complete the hat chat set. It's fantastic to get you on the channel for the first time, mate. Where can the people find you across the socials? And where can people find the coaches panel? And what can they expect from both yourself and the coaches panel in 2024?
Take it all through the coaches panel, Bales. MJ's across it more than anyone. He just pulls the strings with me, Mini Monk, Rids. We do as we're told. It works out perfectly, so we don't ask any questions. But I know MJ in particular and Rids, Mini Monk, Louis, they're fired up for 2024. I've never seen Rids put in so much work in the preseason, so I'm genuinely pumped for what that brings. But yeah, coaches panel everywhere. There's content everywhere. MJ's just getting reacquainted with his family after doing 50 podcasts in 50 days. So they're just gearing up. I saw he did another podcast already on the preseason game between Richmond and Collingwood. So he's just on fire. it's going to be an awesome season, Bales. I really feel like this opening round has reinvigorated a lot of coaches that have played this game for a long, long time. And I think it's super exciting because it is fresh. It's new. We're going to learn a lot. Sort of feels like it's here to stay. I don't know about you, but I feel like opening round's not going to be a one-year wonder. I feel like it's going to be another marquee slot on the calendar, and teams are going to want to be part of it. So, just go coaches panel. But Bales, loving your work, mate. I know you're putting in a stack of work, so I just want to say we appreciate it. And
thanks, mate.
Enjoy. And I've taken away the time from you watching a practice game, so I'm just putting you further and further behind. But I know you don't care and you love it.
Thanks, mate. No, I appreciate the kind words and appreciate you jumping on. But no, mate, I feel bad for taking you away from watching your Ds. But the good thing is with this day and age, we get to watch it on the replay on K, which is fantastic. So no, it'd be good to watch that. But tomorrow's episode will be the final episode of the series. We got the 25th episode. We got another special guest. He prefers classic over draft. And we'll be talking about a couple of defenders that have been buzz names this preseason and have been for the best part of a couple of months that you could consider as underpriced options anywhere from your D2 to your D4. So looking forward to that. So thanks, Kane, again for jumping on, and we'll catch you guys in the final episode of the Head2Head series tomorrow. So we're out. Cheers.